Aloha, friends, and welcome to part two of our series, Being in the Way. This one's called The Single Eye, and I'd like to begin with one of my all time favorite poems. This one's by a fella named Gerard Manley Hopkins, and goes a little something like this. As kingfishers catch fire, dragonflies draw flame. As tumbled over rim and roundy wells stones ring, like each tucked string tells, each hung bell's bow swing, finds tongue to fling out broad its name. Each mortal thing does one thing and the same. Deals out that being indoors, each one dwells, selves, goes itself. Myself, it speaks and spells. Crying, what I do is me, for that I came. I say more, the just man justices, keeps grace, that keeps all his goings graces. Acts in God's eye, what in God's eye he is, Christ. For Christ plays in 10,000 places, lovely in limbs, and lovely in eyes not his, to the Father, through the features of men's faces. So, what do you hear in that? To me, what I hear the theme is congruence. In the poem, you notice that there is no performance. There's no hardened exterior edge that's managing optics and metering out self-disclosure. There's no internal argument. Instead, each thing appears and behaves like exactly what it already is. So it's congruence. That's the theme of today's talk, and I think it's at the heart of what Jesus describes in Matthew 6:22. So the key text for today goes a little something like this. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is unhealthy, then your whole body will be full of darkness. If you situate this concept in the flow of the teaching as Matthew lays it out in his gospel, you notice that the concept preceding this morning's text, this theme of congruence, the concept just before it, speaks directly to the experience of the inner split. But in it, Jesus essentially warns about the dangers of turning our spiritual life into another performance. About generosity, he says, if you want to take care of others, you want to be generous with your resources, that's great, but don't turn it into a public spectacle. In fact, if your right hand would like to do a favor for somebody, don't even let your left hand in on the deal. And when his disciples say, Master, teach us how to pray, he's basically gives them the same advice. He says, first of all, don't go to the synagogue and make a whole show out of it. Instead, go into your inner room, shut the door, steady yourself, quiet down, learn to listen. Don't heap up empty words, because your Father in heaven knows what you need before you ever even say anything, which basically means most of the time we don't even really know what we actually want, let alone what we really need. The concept immediately following today's text speaks to anxiety. And this is a famous one too. Christ says, you know, don't worry, don't worry about your life. Don't worry about what you're going to wear or what you're going to eat or the troubles that tomorrow might bring. Instead, consider the lilies of the field. Look at the birds in the air. See how they're living. Have you ever seen a geranium that appears confused? Have you ever met a cardinal with aspirations to become I don't know, banker? What do cardinals and geraniums have in common? Cardinals, cardinal. Geraniums, geranium. There are very few cases of mistaken identity or over ambitiousness. And the reason he brings this up is to point to the reality that this kind of uh, performance based confusion that seems unique to the human race is, well, it splits our awareness and it is quietly exhausting. So when the eye, being the lamp of the body, is situated in the broader teaching, we see the little flow. It's this pattern, and it goes something like this: what we treasure trains the way that we see. How we see directs the way that we live. How we live determines whether we experience anxiety or freedom in this life. And right at the center of that is the eye. So, a quick word about these words, healthy and unhealthy. Healthy comes from a word that means, if you break it down to its constituent parts, it means without twisting, clear, undivided. In the King James Version of the Bible, it doesn't say a healthy eye, it says a single eye. Unhealthy means something like pain, toil, distress. It essentially means overburdened. And so a faithful retranslation of this verse could go something like this: if your eye is single, undivided, then your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is overburdened, if you're worn out, then your whole body will be full of darkness. An undivided eye is light because there's nothing extra being carried. There's no image management. There's no inner tug of war, no constant self analysis and interpretation. A divided eye is heavy, and it's heavy because it's overburdened, it's exhausted. Everything has to pass through this with tremendous effort. And what is the nature of that effort? Well, how much time have you spent spying on your own mind? That has been my most consistent spiritual practice of the last decade. Just tuning in to the frequency in my own mind and paying attention to the loops and the patterns. And I will tell you a couple things that I've noticed. Uh, it's judgment and in interpretation, meaning making, storytelling, narrative. Like just tune into that channel for a minute. Like just spy on your mind for a second. When I do, I notice that my mind is running 1,000 calculations per glance, saying, is this useful to me? Is this good or bad? Is this beautiful? Is this ugly? Is this in need of repair? Is it warm enough? Is it cool enough? What do they think? What does she think? Am I doing all right? What about tomorrow? Ernest Hemingway is, I'm pretty sure, inaccurately credited for writing the shortest, saddest story ever. Uh, it's only one sentence long. If you heard it, it goes like this: uh, for sale, one pair of baby shoes, never worn. When I shared this story at All Together Now last week, one person over here responded, "Oh my gosh, that is devastating." And then someone over here said, "Oh, I think that's a wonderful story. Seems that somebody accurately realized that their baby doesn't need shoes. And so it's a waste of money." Oftentimes it isn't the input or the experience that's exhausting. It's the rumination and the story that we tell ourselves to make meaning. The mind, left unchecked, very naturally interprets everything in terms of how it relates to me. And constant interpretation is quietly exhausting. It's exhausting because in this familiar, like seemingly default mode of consciousness, we're never simply being. And we're rarely ever letting other things simply be. And that's exactly the heaviness that Jesus is describing. It's the psychic strain of the undisciplined mind. The good news, what Christ says, is that that's not the only way to operate in this world, that there's another way that we can be in our bodies and in our lives. We can live in a way that our entire body and experience of reality will be light instead of so heavy. But what that requires, living that way, means that our full self will be brought into the daylight with nothing hidden, nothing managed, no acting. So here's a little practice you could try sometime if you want. Just sit down somewhere, take a few deep breaths, and look around the room until your eyes fall on something benign, something like a light switch. And just look at that light switch and then pay attention to what your mind is doing. The mind immediately starts sorting useful, useless, off color, broken, needs fixing, needs ignoring. Man, I'm grateful for electricity. The mind is always asking, what is this in relation to me? Unified sight, congruence, the single eye, sees the same thing just without appropriating immediately. It lets something be what it is without instantly rendering some kind of verdict. And the quiet miracle is the more we allow other things to simply be what they are, the more we learn to allow ourself, myself, me, just to be who I am without judgment, without condemnation, without editing, without embarrassment. When the way you see is undivided, your whole self appears as you actually are. Not perfected, not edited, not hidden, but true and complete. And that includes your shadow. When everything is judged, as the mind naturally does, then very quickly, early on, we come to realize that some parts of us are accepted and helpful and invited to be, and other parts of us most certainly aren't. But the parts of us that aren't invited to the party don't simply cease to be, they go underground, they go hidden. And when judgment finally softens, when we learn to handle ourselves with care, those parts emerge and they demand to be seen, to be allowed to act. And this is tricky territory. To re-suppress these rather unsavory aspects of our being only compounds the inner split. To act on these darker impulses generally complicates ordinary life. So what are we to do? Well, Christ says, be congruent, which is don't subdivide, which is bring awareness to the parts of yourself that you'd really rather wish weren't there. And rather than condemning and judging those aspects, just notice them. Awareness means we're no longer driven by what we refuse to see, or as Carl Jung so eloquently put it, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it fate. So awareness doesn't give us mastery, but awareness does give us choice. And from there, it's kind of up to us. And this can be unbearable at first, because when division relaxes, when judgment softens, when suppression ceases, grief appears, anger boils out, old hidden patterns become visible. And we realize pretty quickly there was a reason I was hiding that. And I guess it's just important to be gentle with ourselves and to remind us to allow God's Spirit to remind us that this isn't failure. It's just something that has been hidden for decades, finally feels safe enough to appear. Given that, it makes sense that the next topic Jesus would touch on would be anxiety. And he doesn't shame anxiety, he explains why it exists. And I think we could summarize it a little bit like this: anxiety isn't a lack of faith, it's the felt experience of a life that has been divided up. When our vision is split, our body, our nervous system stays braced. When vision is unified, when there is acceptance, the body begins to rest. And this isn't because the world has suddenly become more safe. It's because the self has stopped fighting itself. And in that surrender, a more subtle truth is safe to emerge. That underneath all of the swirling confusion, all of the division, all of the attempts to make and break and reform ourselves, deeper than all of the differences that we experience between ourselves and the world around us and each other, down there at the bottom of everything, as Hopkins says, is Christ. That Christ plays in 10,000 places, lovely in limbs and lovely in eyes not his, to the Father through the features of men's faces. So Jesus isn't telling us to get our sight under control or to become light. He already established that you are the light of the world. That's the beginning point. That congruence is actually your natural state. You're no different than the geranium. You're just thinking a lot more. What he's asking is, what would it be like if your whole self, even the parts that you're not particularly proud of, were allowed to appear as they actually are? What would the experience of that be? Well, it would begin with discomfort and it would move into lightness. That's the movement. I'm going to close with another deeply treasured poem. This one is ancient. It goes like this: we awaken in Christ's body as Christ awakens in our body. And my poor hand is Christ. He enters my foot and is infinitely me. I move my hand, and wonderfully, my hand becomes Christ, becomes all of him. For God is indivisibly whole, seamless in his godhood. I move my foot, and at once he appears like a flash of lightning. Do my words seem blasphemous? Then open your heart to him and let yourself receive the one who is opening to you so deeply. For if we genuinely love him, we wake up inside Christ's body, where all of our body, all over, every most hidden part of it, is realized in joy as Christ. And he makes us utterly real. And everything that's hurt, everything that seemed to us dark, harsh, shameful, maimed, ugly, irreparably damaged, is in him transformed and recognized as whole, as lovely, and radiant in his light. He awakens as the beloved in every last part of our body. Nothing excluded, nothing abandoned, nothing shamed into obedience. Everything belongs. It ain't easy, but it's true. All right. I love y'all. Hope to see you soon.